Good morning, Year 10. I hope you're all really well. So, what we're doing today then is we are doing another paper 1 question 1, and that finishes us off for this week before we move on to question 2 next week. So, can you please, for your do now, just recap what will paper 1 question 1 ask you to do, please? Thank you. Okay, so today's title is at the top, to understand paper 1 question 1. So we're going to be able to familiarise yourself with an unseen text today, understand how to answer question 1 and apply your knowledge of answering a paper 1 question 1 to that unseen text. So if you just pop that title down for me and today's date. Okay, so what we're going to do now then is I'm going to read this section from chapter 1 from Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. As I read it, I'm going to read a section, I'm going to go back through and highlight and talk about a few bits before moving on to the next part of chapter 1. So here we go. Last night I dreamed I went to Mandalay again. It seemed to me that I was passing through the iron gates that led to the driveway. The drive was just a narrow track now, its stony surface covered with grass and weeds. Sometimes when I thought I had lost it, it would appear again. Beneath a fallen tree or beyond a muddy pool formed by the winter rains, the trees had thrown out new low branches which stretched across my way. I came to the house suddenly and stood there with my heart beating fast and tears filling my eyes. Okay, so if we just have a little chat about this. So I've put here what Mandalay is. Now Mandalay is the name of a large estate house in its own grounds. So a large house, and around it it's got its own gardens. It seemed to me that I was passing through the iron gates that led to the driveway. The drive was just a narrow track now, its stony surface covered with grass and weeds. The fact that it's covered in weeds could suggest that no one's lived there for a while, could suggest that maybe it's not very well cared for. Sometimes when I thought I'd lost it, it would appear again beneath a fallen tree or a muddy pool formed by winter rains. Again, it's that idea of something not being quite looked after. The trees had thrown out new low branches which stretched across my way. I came to the house suddenly and stood there with my heart beating fast and tears filled my eyes. So it makes us want to ask, well, why is this person's heart beating fast? Why are tears filling their eyes? What kind of emotion are they feeling and why are they feeling that emotion? We then move on to look at the next section. There was Mandalay, our Mandalay, secret and silent as it had always been, the grey stone shining in the moonlight of my dream. Time could not spoil the beauty of those walls, nor of the place itself. As it lay like a jewel in the hollow of a hand, the grass sloped down towards the sea, which was a sheet of silver lying calm under the moon, like a lake undisturbed by wind or storm. I turned again to the house, and I saw the garden had run wild, just as the woods had done. Weeds were everywhere. But moonlight can play strange tricks with the imagination, even with a dreamer's imagination. As I stood there, I could swear that the house was not an empty shell, but lived and breathed as it had lived before. Light came from the windows, the curtains blew softly in the night air, and there, in the library, the door stood half open as we had left it, and my handkerchief on the table beside the bowl of autumn flowers. Okay, so someone clearly lives there, and they've said that, but it's not very well looked after. It's talk about Mandalay laying as a jewel, like a jewel, so somewhere that's quite sacred to this person and very special. The idea that the garden had run wild, again, it's not cared for, weeds were everywhere. As I stood there, I could swear that the house was not an empty shell, but lived and breathed. Okay. Light came from the windows, curtain blew softly in the night air, and there in the library, the door stood half open as we had left it. So it makes you question, as we had left it, well, why did they leave? What were they doing? Okay, we'll move on to the next section. Then a cloud came over the moon like a dark hand across a face. The memories left me. I looked at an empty shell with no whisper of the past about its staring walls. Our fear and suffering were gone now. When I thought about Mandalay in my waking hours, I would not be bitter. I would think of it as it might have been if I could have lived there without fear. I would remember the rose garden in the summer and the birds that sang there, tea under the trees and the sound of the sea coming up to us from the shore below. I would think of the flowers blown from the bushes and the happy valley. These things could never lose their freshness. Okay, so this person is looking back on Mandalay, in like a sort of a melancholy tone. They're being very nostalgic. They miss it. She goes on to say that her fear and suffering were gone now because she wasn't in Mandalay, or someone who was in Mandalay is no longer there. When I thought about it, I would not be bitter. She clearly had a bad relationship or a bad time when she was there. I would think of it as it might have been. If I could have lived there without fear, I would remember all the good things. So if I wasn't scared, I'd have remembered the rose garden and the birds, having tea under the trees, the sound of the sea coming up from us from the shore. Okay. So on this next slide, I'd like you just to jot down a few answers to these 2 bullet points. Obviously, from what I've done talking you through the chapter, and those extracts would help, but can you please tell me what is being described in chapter 1 and what is happening in chapter 1 as well, please? Okay, this is your main task today. Read again the first part of the source. So that was the part on the first slide. Okay, lines 1 to 9 on the first slide. I want you to list 4 things from this part of the text about the grounds of Mandalay. So, this is the first. I'm not very good at writing on this. The first slide where the chapter is. Okay, and you need to be 4 things about the grounds of Mandalay. Okay, you are just bullet pointing what it tells you about the grounds of Mandalay. We're not doing any inference. You're not telling me what it suggests. 4 things about the grounds of Mandalay, please. Once you have done that, you have finished today's lesson. You must remember that there is a quiz for you to complete on Show My Homework as well for this lesson, and I hope you'll have a lovely day.